The blistering Nevada sun beat down on Amelia Davis's back as she hauled water from the well to the Silverton Hotel kitchen, her fourth trip since dawn. A wisp of chestnut hair escaped her tight bun, sticking to her perspiration-dampened forehead. Piach, Nevada, 1872, a town built on silver mines and broken dreams, where Amelia had spent the last 3 years of her life serving others without a moment to call her own. "Faster, girl," Mrs. Whittaker barked from the hotel doorway. "Those miners will be storming in for supper soon, and the potatoes aren't even peeled." "Yes, madam," Amelia replied, quickening her pace despite the ache in her arms. At 22, Amelia had known little beyond servitude. Orphaned at 16, she'd been passed between relatives who viewed her as free labor until landing in Piach under the thumb of the Whittakers. They owned the hotel where she cooked, cleaned, and served from before sunrise until well after sunset. 6 days a week, all for room, board, and pittance wages she could hardly call her own. Inside the sweltering kitchen, Amelia poured the water into the large copper pot and immediately began peeling potatoes, her nimble fingers working quickly despite their rawness. The back door swung open, letting in a gust of dusty air and the town butcher's delivery boy. "Meat delivery for Mrs. Whittaker," the boy announced, dropping a wrapped package on the wooden counter. "Thank you, Billy," Amelia said with a small smile. Small kindnesses were rare in her life, and she treasured each one. Mrs. Whittaker swept into the kitchen, her corseted frame creating an imposing silhouette in the doorway. "The Ruskin party just arrived. They'll need tea and biscuits in the parlor immediately." She glanced at the unwashed breakfast dishes. "And do finish those before dinner service begins." When Mrs. Whittaker left, Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself 3 deep breaths before tackling the next task. It was a small ritual that helped her survive the relentless demands. By nightfall, Amelia had served dinner to 32 miners, washed countless dishes, and scrubbed the dining room floor. Her back ached, her hands were cracked, and exhaustion pulled at her eyelids. Yet she knew there would be more to do once the last patron retired for the night. As she wiped down tables, the hotel's saloon doors swung open, and a stranger walked in tall, broad-shouldered, and unlike the usual rough miners who frequented Piach. He wore a dark Stetson hat that shadowed his features, but she could see his clean-shaven jaw and the way his eyes scanned the room with calm assessment. "Kitchen's closed," Amelia said automatically, though something about this man made her heart beat a little faster. "Not looking for food, madam," he replied, his voice deep with a hint of a southern drawl. "Just a room for a few nights." He stepped closer, and Amelia noticed his clothes worn but well kept, the mark of a man who took pride in himself despite having few possessions. He was a cowboy, judging by the chaps and spurs, but there was something different about him, an intelligence in his gaze that suggested he'd seen more of the world than just cattle trails. "Mr. Whittaker handles the rooms," Amelia said, nodding toward the front desk. "He'll be back shortly." The stranger nodded, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair and the most striking blue eyes Amelia had ever seen. "Much obliged." He hesitated, then added, "You look tired, miss. Been working long." The simple acknowledgement of her fatigue, something no one had bothered to notice in years, caught her off guard. "Since before sunrise," she admitted, then immediately regretted sharing such information with a stranger. "That's a long day for anyone," he observed, studying her with an intensity that made her want to both hide and stand taller at the same time. Amelia turned away, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. "It's what's expected." "Expected by whom?" he asked. When she didn't answer, he pressed, "What's your name, miss?" Amelia, she replied, surprised at herself for answering. Amelia Davis. Patrick Reynolds, he said with a slight bow. Pleased to make your acquaintance. Before their conversation could continue, Mr. Whittaker returned, and Patrick turned his attention to securing a room. Amelia hurried to finish her work, but she could feel Patrick Reynolds' gaze following her until she disappeared into the kitchen. That night, as she lay on her small cot in the servants' quarters, Amelia found her thoughts returning to the stranger with the kind eyes. Something about Patrick Reynolds stirred a longing she'd long suppressed, a desire for something more than endless labor in service to others. But such dreams were dangerous for a woman in her position, and Amelia forced herself to close her eyes and embrace the few hours of sleep she was allowed before dawn would demand her service once again. Morning came too soon. Amelia was already kneading dough for breakfast biscuits when the kitchen door opened. She expected Mrs. Whittaker, ready with more demands, but instead found Patrick Reynolds standing there, looking somewhat out of place in the kitchen's domain. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, surprised. "Guests aren't allowed in the kitchen." He smiled apologetically. "My apologies, Miss Davis. I'm an early riser and was hoping to find some coffee." "Breakfast service doesn't begin until 7, she replied, but found herself reaching for the coffee pot anyway. "But I suppose I could pour you a cup now." "That's mighty kind," he said, watching as she worked. After a moment of silence, he asked, "How long have you been working here at the Silverton?" 3 years, Amelia answered, measuring coffee grounds. "Since I arrived in Piotch. And before that?" She glanced at him, wondering why he was asking such personal questions. "Various households. I've been in service since I was 16. That's young to be on your own." "My parents died of fever," she said simply, pouring water into the pot. "My uncle took me in, then my cousin, then I came here. I'm fortunate to have employment." Patrick's expression suggested he didn't agree with her assessment of fortune, but he didn't argue. "What do you do when you're not working, Miss Davis?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm sorry." "In your spare time," he clarified. "What do you enjoy doing?" Amelia stared at him, unable to form an answer. The concept of spare time was so foreign to her existence that she couldn't recall the last time she'd done anything purely for enjoyment. I don't have much spare time," she finally said, turning to the stove to hide her discomfort. Patrick was quiet for a moment. "What would you do if you did?" It was such a simple question, yet it struck Amelia like a physical blow. What would she do if she could choose? No one had ever asked her that before. Not her uncle who'd worked her from dawn till dusk, not her cousin who'd rented her services to neighbors, and certainly not the Whittakers who saw her as nothing more than a pair of hands to cook, clean, and serve. "I don't know," she whispered, suddenly feeling the weight of her own lost identity. "I've never thought about it." "Never." His voice was gentle, not judging. "When you're busy surviving, Mr. Reynolds, there isn't much room for wanting." She poured his coffee and handed it to him, trying to regain her composure. Patrick accepted the cup, but didn't drink. Instead, he looked at her with those intense blue eyes that seemed to see far too much. "Everyone wants something, Miss Davis, even if they've forgotten how to admit it." Before she could respond, Mrs. Whittaker's voice called from upstairs, demanding to know who was in her kitchen at such an hour. Patrick nodded his thanks for the coffee and left through the back door, leaving Amelia staring after him, her heart racing with thoughts she'd never dared entertain. Throughout the day, Patrick's question echoed in Amelia's mind as she went about her duties. What would she do if she had the choice? The question was both thrilling and terrifying. She'd spent so long being what others needed that she scarcely knew herself anymore. That evening, as she served dinner, she noticed Patrick at a corner table. Unlike the miners who barely acknowledged her existence, He thanked her when she brought his meal, asking how her day had been as though her answer mattered. "It was a day like any other," she replied, uncomfortable with the attention. "And tomorrow will be the same?" he asked. "Of course. Why would it be different?" Patrick studied her for a moment. "Because every sunrise brings the chance for something new, Miss Davis. If you're brave enough to reach for it." His words stayed with her as she finished her evening duties. For the first time in years, Amelia found herself wondering about possibilities beyond the walls of the Silverton Hotel. It was a dangerous path for her thoughts to travel, she knew, but once opened, that door couldn't easily be closed again. The next morning, Amelia woke earlier than usual and slipped outside before her duties began. The town was quiet, the mountains in the distance painted with the pink and gold of dawn. She took a deep breath of the cool morning air, a small act of rebellion against her tightly controlled existence. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she startled at Patrick's voice. He stood a few feet away, leaning against the wall, his hat tipped back as he gazed at the sunrise. "I didn't expect anyone else to be up," she said. "I've always loved this time of day," he replied, "when the world feels fresh and full of possibility." Amelia nodded, unable to deny the peaceful beauty of the moment. "Have you thought any more about my question?" he asked after a comfortable silence. She hesitated. "I would read," she finally admitted. "I used to love books before. Everything. My father taught at a schoolhouse back east. We had shelves full of stories." Patrick smiled, and the warmth of it reached his eyes. "What kind of stories?" "Adventures, mostly. Tales of far-off places and brave heroes." She blushed, feeling childish. "It's silly." "Not at all," he countered. "Dreams are what keep us going when life gets hard." The back door of the hotel opened, and Mrs. Whittaker's voice called out sharply for Amelia. The brief moment of freedom was over. "I have to go," she said, already moving toward the door. "Amelia," Patrick said, stopping her. "Thank you for sharing that with me." Something in his tone, the genuine appreciation for this small glimpse into her true self, made her chest tighten with emotion. She nodded once, then hurried inside to begin another day of service. Throughout the week, Patrick found ways to speak with Amelia, brief exchanges in the early mornings, moments at the end of dinner service, once even offering to help her carry supplies from the general store when they crossed paths in town. Each time he asked her something no one else ever had: what she thought, what she felt, what she wanted. Slowly, like water wearing away stone, his questions began to uncover parts of herself Amelia had long buried. She loved wildflowers but rarely had time to notice them. She enjoyed singing but had stopped years ago. She dreamed of seeing the ocean someday, though she'd never told a soul until she found herself confessing it to Patrick. "Why are you asking me these things?" she finally demanded one evening after he'd inquired about her favorite season. "What does it matter what I prefer?" Patrick considered her question seriously. "Because you matter, Amelia, not just what you can do for others, but who you are." His words struck a chord so deep within her that tears threatened. She turned away quickly, busying herself with straightening already neat table settings. "You'll be leaving soon," she said, changing the subject. "Back to your ranch?" "Not quite yet," he replied. "I have some business that may keep me in Piach a while longer." She shouldn't have felt relief at this news, but she did. Patrick's presence had become a bright spot in her monotonous days, even if his questions forced her to confront the emptiness of her existence. The following Sunday, Amelia's one day off each week, she walked to the small church on the edge of town, as was her custom. Usually, she spent the afternoon afterward mending her clothes or simply resting, but today, as she exited the church, she found Patrick waiting outside, holding the reins of two horses. "Good morning, Miss Davis," he greeted her. I was wondering if you might join me for a ride." Amelia glanced around nervously. "Mr. Reynolds, I couldn't possibly. Just a few hours," he pressed. "The weather's fine, and there's something I'd like to show you." She should have refused. Proper young women didn't go riding alone with men they barely knew. But something about Patrick made her feel safe, and the prospect of a few hours away from the hotel was too tempting to resist. "I don't ride very well," she admitted. "Daisy here is gentle as a lamb," he assured her, patting the smaller horse's neck. "I promise to have you back before anyone misses you." Against her better judgment, Amelia found herself accepting his outstretched hand and mounting the horse. They rode out of town, following a trail that wound through sagebrush-dotted hills. The feeling of freedom, the open sky above, the gentle rhythm of the horse beneath her, the wind in her face was intoxicating. After about an hour, Patrick led them to a small canyon where a hidden spring created an oasis of greenery. Cottonwood trees provided shade, and a small creek bubbled over rocks. It was a secret paradise amid the harsh Nevada landscape. "How did you find this place?" Amelia asked in wonder as Patrick helped her dismount. "I explore wherever I go," he replied with a smile. "Old habit from my scouting days." He spread a blanket on the ground and produced a small picnic from his saddlebags: bread, cheese, dried fruit, and a canteen of fresh water. As they ate, Patrick told her about his life growing up in Texas, fighting briefly in the war, then working cattle drives before saving enough to buy his own small ranch in northern Nevada. "It's nothing grand," he said, "but it's mine. Good grazing land, a sturdy cabin, room to grow." "It sounds wonderful," Amelia said sincerely. "What about you?" he asked. "If you could do anything, go anywhere, what would you choose?" The question no longer startled her as it once had. Over the past days, Patrick's persistent interest had awakened dreams she'd long suppressed. "I'd like to have a little place of my own," she admitted. "Perhaps teach children to read as my father did." "You'd make an excellent teacher," Patrick said with such conviction that Amelia almost believed it possible. As the afternoon passed, they talked more freely than ever before. Patrick told her about his plans to expand his ranch, his hopes of raising fine horses someday. Amelia shared memories of her childhood before her parents' deaths, the books she'd loved, the little girl she'd been before life hardened her. When the sun began its descent, Patrick reluctantly suggested they head back to town. As they rode, Amelia realized she felt more alive than she had in years. For a few precious hours, she hadn't been a servant but simply Amelia, a woman with thoughts and dreams that someone found worth hearing. Back in Piach, Patrick helped her down from the horse in front of the church, where no one would question her presence on the Sabbath. "Thank you," she said, unable to fully express what the day had meant to her. "Amelia," Patrick began, his voice serious, "I want you to know that there are other possibilities for your life than the one you're living." She looked away. "Not for someone like me. Especially for someone like you," he insisted gently. "You're intelligent, hardworking, kind. Any future you want could be yours." "How?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have no money, no family, nowhere else to go." Patrick hesitated, then said, "I may have a proposition for you. Will you meet me tomorrow morning?" Before your duties begin, curiosity overcame her caution. "Yes," she agreed. "At dawn by the livery stable." That night, Amelia barely slept. Patrick's words had awakened a dangerous hope within her. What proposition could he possibly have? She dared not let herself imagine, yet her mind raced with possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Dawn found her waiting nervously by the livery stable, wrapped in her shawl against the morning chill. Patrick arrived promptly, looking somewhat formal despite the early hour. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. Walk with me. They strolled to the edge of town where they could speak privately. Patrick seemed uncharacteristically nervous, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair before facing her. Amelia, I've been in Piach longer than I intended because of you, he began. From the moment I saw you, I recognized something special, a spirit that all your years of servitude haven't managed to break. Her heart pounded as he continued. I came to town planning to hire a housekeeper for my ranch. I need someone to cook meals and keep things in order while I work the land. He took a deep breath. I'd like to offer you that position. Amelia's initial surge of disappointment surprised her. A housekeeper, of course. What had she expected? Yet even as she processed this reaction, she realized what he was truly offering: an escape from the Whitakers, from endless hotel work, from a town where she had no future. The work would be easier than what you do now, Patrick continued quickly. You'd have your own room in the house, Sundays off, and fair wages, real wages that you keep, not the pittance I suspect you're given here. You're offering me another position in service, she said quietly. Patrick's expression grew earnest. For now, yes, but Amelia, my ranch is growing. There's a small town nearby with a school that needs a teacher. In time, if that's what you truly want. He trailed off, watching her face. I'm offering you a chance at the life you dream of, even if the path there begins with more service. Amelia turned away, mind racing. It was madness to consider leaving with a man she'd known for just over a week. Yet something about Patrick Reynolds had awakened a part of her she'd thought long dead, the part that dared to want more. Why me? She asked. You could hire anyone. Patrick stepped closer, his voice low and sincere. Because in all my travels, I've rarely met someone who deserves a chance at happiness more than you do. Someone who's kept their goodness despite having every reason to become bitter. He hesitated, then added more softly and selfishly, because I enjoy your company more than I've enjoyed anyone's in a very long time. The implication behind his words sent a rush of warmth through Amelia's chest. Still, practicality asserted itself. The Whitakers would never let me go. I'm contracted to them for another year. I've already spoken to Mr. Whitaker, Patrick admitted, offered him compensation for breaking your contract. Amelia stared at him in disbelief. You did what? He was reluctant at first, but when I mentioned the amount I was willing to pay. Patrick shrugged. Let's just say money talks in Piach. You bought my contract. Amelia's voice rose with indignation. Without even asking me first. No, Patrick corrected gently. I negotiated the possibility of buying out your contract pending your decision. You're not property to be purchased, Amelia. The choice is entirely yours. His respect for her autonomy, something no one had shown her in years, calmed her rising anger. Still, the prospect of such a dramatic change terrified her. What if it doesn't work out? She asked, voicing her deepest fear. What if I leave here and find myself in an even worse situation? I'll give you 3 months' wages in advance, Patrick said promptly. If at any point you're unhappy, you can take that money and go wherever you choose. No questions asked, no obligations. He reached slowly for her hand, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he held it gently between both of his. I'm not asking you to trust me blindly, Amelia. I'm asking you to trust yourself enough to take a chance on a different life. Amelia looked into his honest blue eyes and felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not just for escape from her current circumstances, but for the possibility of building something meaningful. When would we leave? She asked, her decision made even as the words left her mouth. Patrick's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. As soon as you're ready. Tomorrow, if you wish. Tomorrow, she agreed, her voice stronger than she felt. I have very few possessions to pack. "I'll make the final arrangements with Mr. Whitaker today," Patrick promised. "Meet me at the livery stable at dawn." As Amelia walked back to the hotel, her mind whirled with the enormity of what she'd just agreed to. She was leaving Piatch, the only home she'd known for 3 years, with a man she barely knew. It was either the bravest or the most foolish decision of her life, and she wasn't sure which. When she entered the kitchen, Mrs. Whitaker was waiting, her face pinched with anger. "So," the older woman said coldly, "you found yourself a new position." News traveled fast in small towns. "Mr. Reynolds has offered me employment at his ranch," Amelia confirmed, bracing herself. "After all we've done for you," Mrs. Whitaker hissed. "Putting a roof over your head, feeding you, treating you like family." Amelia almost laughed at the absurdity of this claim. The Whitakers had never treated her as anything more than a servant. "Mr. Whitaker has agreed to release me from my contract," she said instead, keeping her voice neutral. "For a handsome sum, yes," Mrs. Whitaker admitted bitterly. "Though what that cowboy wants with you is beyond my understanding. I've warned him you're hardly worth the price." The insult stung, but Amelia refused to show it. "I'll work today as usual and leave in the morning." Mrs. Whitaker's expression turned calculating. "You realize what people will think, don't you? A single woman going off alone with a man she barely knows. Your reputation will be ruined." "I'm going as his housekeeper," Amelia replied calmly, though the warning sent a chill through her. Mrs. Whitaker laughed harshly. "Is that what he told you?" "Men say many things to get what they want, girl. Remember that when you find yourself with no options and no one to help you." With that parting shot, she swept from the kitchen, leaving Amelia with doubts gnawing at her confidence. Was she making a terrible mistake? Was Patrick Reynolds truly the honorable man he seemed? Or was Mrs. Whitaker right to be suspicious of his motives? Amelia worked through her final day at the Silverton in a haze of uncertainty. By evening, she had packed her meager belongings, 2 dresses besides the one she wore, undergarments, a shawl, her mother's silver hairbrush, and the single book she'd managed to keep through all her years of service, a worn copy of Robinson Crusoe. As she prepared for bed one last time in her small servant's room, a knock came at her door. Opening it cautiously, she found Sally, the laundry girl, standing there with something clutched in her hands. "I heard you're leaving," Sally whispered, glancing nervously down the hall. "I wanted to give you this for luck." She pressed a small fabric pouch into Amelia's hand. Inside was a tiny silver charm in the shape of a bird. "It was my grandmother's," Sally explained. "She said it represented freedom. I thought, well, you're flying away from here, you should have it." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes at the unexpected kindness. "Sally, I can't take this, please," the girl insisted. "You were always kind to me when no one else was. I want you to have your chance." Amelia hugged the younger girl tightly. "Thank you, I'll treasure it." After Sally left, Amelia lay awake long into the night, the bird charm clutched in her palm. By dawn, her determination had solidified. Whatever awaited her beyond Piatch, it had to be better than remaining trapped in a life where she was nothing more than a pair of hands to serve others' needs. For the first time in years, she would choose her own path. The morning was cool and misty as Amelia slipped out of the hotel with her small carpetbag. Patrick was waiting at the livery stable as promised, already having saddled both horses. When he saw her, his face lit with a smile that chased away her lingering doubts. "You came," he said simply. "I said I would," she replied, lifting her chin with newfound determination. Patrick helped secure her bag to the saddle, then assisted her onto the mare he'd called Daisy. "It's about 4 days' ride to the ranch," he explained. "We'll take it slow, stay at proper establishments along the way." Amelia appreciated his sensitivity to her reputation, though in truth she had little left to protect. A woman in her position was already considered barely respectable. As they rode out of Piach, Amelia didn't look back. The town had been a place of survival, not happiness, and she felt no nostalgia for the life she was leaving behind. They traveled north, following established trails through Nevada's rugged landscape. Patrick proved to be a considerate traveling companion, setting an easy pace that wouldn't exhaust Amelia, stopping frequently to rest the horses and admire the sweeping vistas of mountains and valleys. Each night, true to his word, Patrick secured separate accommodations for them at roadside inns or in small towns along their route. He was unfailingly respectful, never presuming or pushing boundaries. Yet Amelia found herself increasingly drawn to his quiet strength and genuine interest in her thoughts and feelings. Around evening campfires, they talked for hours. Patrick told her about his dreams for the ranch, the horses he wanted to breed, the crops he hoped to grow, the home he was building bit by bit with his own hands. Amelia shared memories of her childhood, her love of learning, and slowly, tentatively, her hopes for the future. "Do you really think I could teach someday?" she asked on their third night as they sat beside a small fire outside a roadside way station. "Without question," Patrick replied confidently. "The town near my ranch, Silver Creek, has been trying to establish a proper school for over a year. They have a building but no teacher willing to come to such a remote location." "But I have no formal training," Amelia protested. "You said your father was a teacher. Surely you learned from him." "Yes, and you can read, write, calculate figures, know history and geography," she nodded. "That's more education than most in these parts," Patrick assured her. "The children there need someone who cares, Amelia. Someone who believes learning matters. The rest you can figure out along the way." His faith in her abilities was both terrifying and exhilarating. No one had believed in her potential for so long that she scarcely knew how to respond. On the afternoon of the fourth day, they crested a ridge, and Patrick reined his horse to a stop. "There it is," he said, pointing to the valley below. "Reynolds Ranch." Amelia followed his gesture and caught her breath. The ranch spread across a lush valley watered by a winding creek. A modest but well-built cabin stood near a barn and corrals, with fenced pastures stretching toward distant mountains. It wasn't grand or impressive by any measure, but there was something about the peaceful setting that immediately felt like a sanctuary. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. Patrick's expression was a mixture of pride and something more vulnerable. "It's still rough around the edges. I've been building it bit by bit for 3 years now." "You've done this all yourself?" Amelia asked, impressed by the evident care that had gone into the construction. "Mostly. Neighbors help with big projects, barn raising and such. That's how things work out here. Everyone lends a hand when needed." As they rode down into the valley, Amelia saw details she'd missed from a distance: a vegetable garden beside the cabin, chickens pecking in a fenced yard, a small orchard of young fruit trees. This wasn't just a cattle operation. It was a home in the making. When they reached the cabin, Patrick helped Amelia dismount, then led her inside while explaining, "It's not much yet, but I've been adding to it each year." The interior was simple but surprisingly comfortable. A large main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace at one end. A wooden table with 4 chairs occupied the center, and shelves lined one wall, many filled with books that made Amelia's heart leap with excitement. "You have a library," she exclaimed, moving immediately to examine the titles. Patrick laughed. "Hardly that grand, but yes, I like to read, especially during the long winter evenings." He showed her 2 bedrooms off the main room, one clearly his own and a smaller one that he'd prepared for her. It contained a narrow bed with a colorful quilt, a small dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "I hope it will be comfortable," he said, suddenly seeming nervous about her reaction. "I know it's simpler than you might be used to. It's perfect," Amelia interrupted, overwhelmed by emotion. The small room was more private space than she'd had since her parents died. The bed looked clean and comfortable, and the window with its beautiful view was a luxury she hadn't dared hope for. Patrick gave her time to settle in while he tended to the horses. Amelia unpacked her few possessions, arranging them carefully in the dresser drawers. She placed Sally's silver bird charm on the windowsill where sunlight could catch it, a reminder of the freedom she'd chosen. That evening, they shared a simple meal that Patrick prepared, apologizing for the plain fare. "Usually I just cook whatever's quickest after a day's work," he explained. "I'm afraid my skills in the kitchen are limited." "Well, that's something I can certainly help with," Amelia offered, already mentally cataloging the pantry supplies she'd glimpsed. After dinner, they sat before the fireplace, the crackling flames casting a warm glow over the room. Outside, the vast Nevada sky had deepened to indigo, stars appearing one by one in the darkening expanse. "Tomorrow I can show you around the property," Patrick said. "Introduce you to the neighbors when they come by. They're curious about you, I'm sure." "What did you tell them about me?" Amelia asked, suddenly anxious. "Just that I'd hired a housekeeper from Piotch," he assured her. "Nothing more. Your story is yours to tell or keep private as you choose." His consideration touched her deeply. For so many years, Amelia had felt like property, her life dictated by others' needs and expectations. Patrick consistently treated her as a person with her own agency, her own right to privacy and choice. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for this opportunity, but for asking what I wanted in the first place. No one's done that in a very long time." Patrick's expression grew serious. "Amelia, I want to be honest with you. When I first came to Piotch, I was simply looking for household help. But after meeting you, after our conversations—" He hesitated, then continued more carefully, "My interest in your happiness goes beyond that of an employer." Amelia's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" "That while I intend to honor our arrangement exactly as agreed, I hope that in time, as you come to know me better, you might consider—" He paused, searching for the right words. "A different relationship between us, if you were so inclined." The directness of his statement both alarmed and thrilled her. "Patrick, you don't need to respond," he interrupted gently. "I just wanted you to know my feelings are sincere, and that regardless of how you ultimately feel, your position here is secure. You'll always be treated with respect in my home." Amelia studied his face in the firelight, seeing no deception there, only honest vulnerability. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "This is all so new." "Say nothing, then," he suggested with a small smile. "Let time show us both what's right. For now, you're my housekeeper, I'm your employer, and we're starting fresh in this place." His willingness to wait, to let her find her footing in this new life before pressing for more, reassured Amelia more than any passionate declarations might have. She nodded, returning his smile cautiously. "Then that's what we'll be," she agreed. "For now." The following weeks established a rhythm to life at Reynolds Ranch that Amelia found deeply satisfying. She rose early each morning to prepare breakfast before Patrick headed out to work the land and tend the cattle. During the days, she kept the cabin in order, tended the vegetable garden, and prepared meals that were increasingly elaborate as she experimented with the available ingredients. Patrick had been honest about the work being less demanding than her position at the hotel. where the Whittakers had worked her from dawn until well past dusk. Here, she found herself with hours of free time each day. At first, this abundance of leisure was almost uncomfortable. She didn't know what to do with herself when tasks were completed, and no one was making demands. Gradually, she rediscovered pleasures long denied. She read voraciously from Patrick's collection of books. She took long walks along the creek, observing wildflowers and birds. She even began sketching with pencil and paper Patrick provided, capturing the mountains and valleys around her. True to his word, Patrick introduced her to the neighbors' scattered ranchers and farmers who lived within riding distance. The Harmons to the north, an older couple who immediately adopted Amelia as a surrogate daughter. The Winslow family to the east, with 5 boisterous children who looked at Amelia with undisguised curiosity. The Blackwell brothers to the south, taciturn bachelors who nodded politely but said little. Most importantly, Patrick took Amelia to Silver Creek, the small settlement about an hour's ride from the ranch. Despite its grand name, it was little more than a general store, a saloon, a small church, and a dozen homes clustered around a crossroads. But as promised, it had a schoolhouse, a sturdy one-room building currently sitting empty. "Folks built it last year," explained Mrs. Cooper, the storekeeper's wife who showed them around the building. "Had a teacher for about 3 months, but she married a miner and moved to Virginia City. Been trying to find someone ever since." "How many children would attend?" Amelia asked, running her hand along a desk and imagining it filled with eager young minds. "About 15, ranging from 6 to 14, Mrs. Cooper replied. "Good kids, mostly. Bit wild from lack of proper schooling, but eager to learn." As they rode back to the ranch that afternoon, Amelia's mind was filled with possibilities. "I could do it," she said suddenly. "Teach, I mean, if the town council would consider me." Patrick smiled. "I've already mentioned the possibility to them. They're eager to meet you properly." She turned to him in surprise. "You've been planning this all along, haven't you?" "I told you I wanted to help you find the life you dreamed of," he reminded her. "But it's your decision, Amelia. You can remain my housekeeper for as long as you wish. The teaching position is just a possibility, not an expectation." His continual respect for her choices only deepened Amelia's growing affection for him. Over the weeks, their relationship had evolved in small, significant ways. Conversations lasted longer into the evenings. Their hands occasionally brushed when passing items at dinner. Sometimes, she caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart flutter. Yet true to his word, Patrick never presumed, never pushed beyond the boundaries of propriety. He was patient, allowing Amelia to set the pace of their developing relationship. 2 months after her arrival at Reynolds Ranch, Amelia officially applied for the teaching position at Silver Creek. The town council, consisting of the minister, the storekeeper, and 2 prominent ranchers, interviewed her in the church after Sunday services. "Your father was a teacher, you say?" asked Reverend Michaels, a kind-faced man with silver hair. "Yes, in Pennsylvania," Amelia confirmed. "I assisted him often and learned his methods." "And what would you teach our children, Miss Davis?" asked Mr. Thornton, the most skeptical of the councilmen. "Reading, writing, and arithmetic, of course," she replied confidently. "History, geography, natural sciences as well. But most importantly, I would teach them to think for themselves, to question, to discover the joy of learning." Her passionate response seemed to impress even Mr. Thornton. After a brief deliberation, the council offered her the position, to begin with the fall term in 3 weeks' time. "It's not much pay," Reverend Michaels apologized, naming a sum that was indeed modest. "It's enough," Amelia assured him, too elated to worry about finances. Between her teaching salary and what she'd saved from Patrick's generous wages, she would have more independence than she'd known in years. When she told Patrick the news that evening, his face lit with genuine happiness for her. "I knew they'd choose you," he said proudly. "I couldn't have done it without you," Amelia replied, impulsively taking his hand across the dinner table. "You've given me so much more than employment, Patrick. You've given me a chance to become the person I was meant to be." His fingers tightened around hers, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Amelia," he said softly, "may I court you properly now, not as your employer but as a man who cares deeply for you?" The question, though not unexpected, still sent a thrill through her. Over the weeks, she'd grown increasingly certain of her feelings for Patrick Reynolds. His kindness, his integrity, his respect for her independence all had combined to create a bond unlike any she'd known before. "Yes," she answered simply. "I would like that very much." His smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Keeping hold of her hand, he came around the table and with careful respect placed the lightest of kisses on her cheek. "Thank you," he whispered near her ear, his voice thick with emotion. That evening marked a subtle but significant shift in their relationship. Patrick began actively courting Amelia with a thoughtfulness that touched her deeply. He brought her wildflowers from his rides across the ranch. He carved her a small wooden box for her treasures. He read aloud to her in the evenings, his deep voice bringing stories to life beside the crackling fire. As the days passed and autumn approached, Amelia prepared for her teaching role with meticulous care. She organized lessons, created reading primers for the youngest children, and fashioned counting tools from materials around the ranch. Patrick built her a small desk to use in the schoolhouse, sturdy and practical with a drawer that locked her very own space that no one else could claim. The school term began in early October, with 15 children arriving at the schoolhouse with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some, like the Winslow children, had received sporadic education before and welcomed the structure. Others, particularly the older boys, viewed school with suspicion and tested Amelia's authority from the first day. It wasn't easy. Amelia returned home exhausted those first weeks, sometimes discouraged by the challenges of managing so many different ages and abilities. But Patrick's unwavering support and practical advice helped her persevere. Gradually, she established routines that worked, earned the children's respect, and began to see real progress in their learning. "Tommy Harris wrote his name today," she told Patrick one evening in late October, her face glowing with pride. "He's been trying for weeks, and today he did it perfectly." "That's wonderful," Patrick said, his admiration evident. "You're making a difference, Amelia, just as I knew you would." As she taught during the days and returned to the ranch each evening, Amelia found herself living a life she'd scarcely dared imagine. She was respected in the community, doing work she found meaningful, and coming home to a man whose company she treasured more each day. Patrick's courtship continued with steadfast patience. They rode together on weekends, exploring the beautiful countryside around the ranch. They shared books and ideas, discussing everything from politics to philosophy beside the evening fire. Occasionally, they attended social gatherings in Silver Creek, where it was increasingly understood they were a couple. One crisp November evening, Patrick suggested a ride to a special spot he wanted to show her. They traveled upward into the foothills until they reached a natural overlook that provided a spectacular view of the valley below. The ranch was visible in the distance, smoke curling from its chimney, while the mountains beyond were painted in the gold and crimson of sunset. "This is breathtaking," Amelia said, dismounting to stand at the edge of the overlook. Patrick joined her, taking her hand in his. "I come here to think sometimes," he admitted. To remind myself how far I've come, how much is still possible. They stood in companionable silence as the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the valley. When Patrick turned to face her, Amelia knew instinctively that this moment mattered. "Amelia," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "when I asked what you wanted that day in Piotch, I never imagined how much my own life would change as a result." He took both her hands in his. "I've come to love you more than I thought possible. Your strength, your kindness, your determination to create a meaningful life despite everything you've endured, all of it, has captured my heart completely." Amelia's breath caught as Patrick slowly knelt before her, still holding her hands. "I don't want you to be my housekeeper anymore," he said. "I want you to be my wife, my partner in everything. I want to build a life with you, not one where you serve me, but where we serve each other, where we face whatever comes together, as equals." Tears blurred Amelia's vision as emotion overwhelmed her. In Patrick, she'd found not just a savior from her old life, but a man who truly saw her worth, her potential, her heart. "Patrick Reynolds," she said, her voice trembling but certain, "asking me what I wanted changed my life forever. And what I want now more than anything is a future with you." "Is that a yes?" he asked, hope blazing in his eyes. "Yes," she confirmed, laughing through her tears. "Absolutely yes." Patrick rose and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with gentle passion that spoke of both restraint and promise. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "I love you, Amelia Davis," he whispered. "Thank you for trusting me enough to build a new life." "And I love you," she replied, the words coming easily now that she'd allowed herself to feel their truth. "Thank you for asking what I wanted when no one else cared to know." They married 3 weeks later in the Silver Creek Church, with the entire community in attendance. The schoolchildren presented Amelia with a handmade quilt, each square representing something they'd learned from her. Mrs. Harmon provided a wedding cake, and the Blackwell brothers surprised everyone by playing fiddle and guitar for dancing afterward. Amelia wore a new dress of pale blue, ordered specially from Carson City. As Reverend Michaels pronounced them husband and wife, she looked into Patrick's eyes and saw reflected there all the possibilities she'd once thought forever denied her. That night, as they returned to the ranch, now truly her home as well as Patrick carried her across the threshold with tender care. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reynolds," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the main room, which had been transformed with fresh flowers and candlelight. "It feels like I've been coming home since the first day you brought me here," Amelia replied, touching his face with wonder. "Like everything in my life was leading me to you." Their first night as husband and wife was a revelation of tenderness and passion that Amelia had never imagined possible. Patrick was gentle, patient, ensuring her comfort and pleasure with the same consideration he'd shown in every aspect of their relationship. In the quiet aftermath, lying in his arms as moonlight filtered through the bedroom window, Amelia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. From servitude to independence, from loneliness to love, from a life constrained by others' demands to one shaped by her own choices. "What are you thinking?" Patrick murmured, stroking her hair. "About how different my life would be if you hadn't come to Piotch," she answered honestly. "If you hadn't asked me that question no one else ever had." He pulled her closer. "I think we were meant to find each other, Amelia. Some things are just written in the stars." The years that followed proved the truth of Patrick's belief in their destiny together. Amelia continued teaching at the Silver Creek School, watching with pride as her students progressed and the school's reputation grew. Eventually, more families moved to the area, drawn partly by the quality of education available for their children. Patrick's ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Amelia's practical management complemented his vision, and together they expanded the operation to include horse breeding alongside the cattle. The Reynolds horses became known throughout the territory for their quality and temperament. In their second year of marriage, they welcomed a son, Michael, named for Amelia's father. 2 years later, a daughter joined their family, Elizabeth, called Beth, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. A second son, James, completed their family 3 years after that. As the children grew, the ranch house grew with them. Patrick added rooms, a larger kitchen, even a small library where Amelia could store the growing collection of books they ordered from catalogs and brought back from occasional trips to Carson City. The Silver Creek community flourished as well. By 1885, it had grown into a proper town with a mayor, a newspaper, and a new, larger schoolhouse where Amelia served as headmistress, overseeing 2 additional teachers. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Patrick surprised Amelia with a trip to San Francisco, her first glimpse of the ocean she'd dreamed of seeing since childhood. Standing on the shore, watching the endless waves roll in, she leaned against her husband's strong shoulder. Was it worth the wait? He asked, his arm around her waist. Everything has been worth the wait, she replied, thinking of all they'd built together. But I wouldn't have known to wait for any of it if you hadn't asked me what I wanted that day. Patrick turned her to face him, his expression serious despite the joy of the moment. That's the question I'll keep asking you for the rest of our lives, Amelia. What do you want? Because making your dreams come true has become the greatest purpose of my life. Amelia kissed him, tasting the salt air on his lips. I already have everything I could want, she assured him. A meaningful purpose, beautiful children, a home filled with love. She touched his beloved face. And you, Patrick Reynolds, always you. As they stood together watching the Pacific sunset paint the sky in colors more glorious than Amelia had imagined possible, she reflected on the extraordinary power of that single question Patrick had asked in a hot kitchen in Piotch so many years ago. What do you want? 4 simple words that had changed everything, setting her free from a life of servitude and opening the door to a future limited only by her own dreams. In Patrick, she'd found not just a husband, but a partner who valued her mind, her heart, her desires. In their children, she found the family she'd thought forever lost. In her teaching, she found purpose beyond herself. What are you thinking now? Patrick asked, noticing her contemplative smile. That sometimes the most important questions are the simplest, she replied. And that I'm profoundly grateful you cared enough to ask. He drew her close as the last rays of sunlight gilded the waves. And I'm grateful every day that you were brave enough to answer, my love. Every single day. In the years that followed, as their children grew and the 19th century gave way to the 20th, Amelia and Patrick Reynolds remained pillars of the Silver Creek community. Their ranch became a gathering place for neighbors, their home a haven of books, ideas, and warmth. Their partnership served as an example to their children of what love could be when built on mutual respect and genuine care for each other's dreams. And though life brought its share of hardships, drought years, economic downturns, the inevitable losses that come with time, they faced each challenge together. Their bond strengthened by the knowledge that they had chosen each other, freely and fully. In quiet moments, Amelia would sometimes touch the small silver bird charm that still sat on her windowsill, a reminder of how far she had flown from that kitchen in Piotch, where a cowboy had asked what she wanted, instead of simply telling her what to do. She had wanted freedom, purpose, love and found them all because she dared to answer honestly, and because Patrick Reynolds had cared enough to listen.